Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's January 7th, 2025 with the VIHE, and we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 6, texts 1 through 8. Again, very interesting that some of the classes have like 25 verses and some of them have 6 verses. 8 verses. Sri Parada Uvacha Komara Acharet Pragno Dharman Bhagavatam Iha Durlabam Manusam Janma Tad Api Abruvam Artadam. So a very famous verse. Prahlad Maharaj said, one who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life, in other words, from the tender age of childhood, to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete freedom. Itahi purushasyeha vishnupado padarpana yad esha sarvabhutanam priya atmeshvara surit. The human form of life affords one a chance to return home back to Godhead. Therefore, every living entity, especially in the human form of life, must engage in devotional service to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. This devotional service is natural because Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the most beloved, the master of the soul, and the well-wisher of all other living entities. Sukham andriyakam daitya deha yogena dehinam sarvatra labhyate daivad yata dukam ayatnata. Prahlad Maharaj continued, my dear friends born of demoniac families, the happiness perceived with reference to the sense objects by contact with the body can be obtained in any form of life according to one's past fruitive activities. Such happiness is automatically obtained without endeavor, just as we obtain distress. This is also a very famous verse, and Srila Prabhupada quotes very often. Tatprayasho nakartavyo yata ayur vaiva param na tata vindate kshemam mukunda charanambujam. Endeavors merely for sense gratification or material happiness through economic development are not to be performed, for they result only in a loss of time and energy with no actual profit. Even if one's endeavors are directed towards Krishna consciousness, one will surely attain, if one's endeavors are directed towards Krishna consciousness, one will surely attain this spiritual platform of self-realization. There is no such benefit from engaging oneself in economic development. Tato ya te takushala, shemaya bhavam ashritaha, shariram porusham yavam, na vipadyeta pushkalam. Therefore, while immaterial existence, bhavam ashritaha, a person fully competent to distinguish wrong from right, must endeavor to achieve the highest goal of life, as long as the body is stout and strong and is not embarrassed by dwindling. Pumso varsha shatam yayush tad arjam chatiratmanaha nishpalam yad ashorarchyam sheteng dam praptitastamaha. Every human being has a maximum duration of life of 100 years, but for one who cannot control his senses, half of those years are completely lost, because at night he sleeps 12 hours, being covered by ignorance. Therefore, such a person has a lifetime of only 50 years. Mukhasya balya kaishore kridato yativim shati jaraya grastade hasya yatyakalpasyavim shati. In the tender age of childhood, when everyone is bewildered, one passes 10 years. Similarly, in boyhood, engaged in sporting and playing, one passes another 10 years. In this way, 20 years are wasted. Similarly, in old age, when one is an invalid, unable to perform even material activities, one passes another 20 years wastefully. Durapurena kamena mohena cha baliyasha shesham griheshu shaktasya pramatasya payatihi. One whose mind and senses are uncontrolled becomes increasingly attached to family life because of insatiable lusty desires and very strong illusion. In such a madman's life, the remaining years are also wasted because even during those years, he cannot engage himself in devotional service. So, a very depressing view of human life. Actually, of course, reminds us a little bit of Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Men. That we simply go from one age to another, not doing anything really significant or meaningful. And then we die. So, as I say, depressing. So, this section is about that human life is a limited lifespan that can be used rightly or wrongly, and that right use should start in early childhood. So the basic question that's answered here is, how can we best use our life, right? This is a main question we ask ourselves all the time, every day. What should I do today? What's on my calendar for today? What should I accomplish? And we have to prioritize things. We cannot put everything as the top priority. It doesn't work. You have to have some things as a top priority and some things as a middle priority and some things as a lower priority. So what are we going to do? So the main themes here is, what most people think of as a normal life and just ordinary and necessary living is, from the spiritual point of view, a waste of the human life. So Prahlad Maharaj is describing a normal life. But he's saying you're wasting, you're not using it properly. And we also have a theme here that Prahlad Maharaj is not compromising, even when he's talking to 5-year-olds. He's speaking the straight sauce to them. Of course, he's speaking in a way that they can understand, but he's speaking the straight sauce. Okay. So, first section is verses 1 through 5, right utility of human life. And in verses 1 and 2, he's making the point that a human being should practice bhakti from childhood. So, verse 1 is a very important verse, quoted often, that one should start brahmachari life from age 5, which is technically the end of the Kumara age. He was talking about Kumara age. So we should train our children at home and in all schools to hear about the Lord and to practice the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. And I will tell you very frankly that I've been traveling around the world now since 2006, off and on. I've been around the world over 20 times, visited probably somewhere around 100 or so ISKCON centers, stay in many temples. I've stayed in many people's homes. And I will tell you that the majority of people are not training, the majority of devotees are not giving much training to their little children in Krishna consciousness. Not much. People are very, very busy with so many things in life. And even though they're devotees, their training for their children tends to be very minimal. Now, how do I know this? Because, again, I'll stay in people's homes and I'm seeing what they're doing. And, I had some classes I was giving with older children who were raised in devotee families, like age 12 through 18. We were teaching them about career dharma. And I found that most of the young persons there didn't even have like theoretical, intellectual, technical familiarity with a lot of the terminology and the concepts that are essential in our understanding of Krishna consciousness. And that, even though I've encountered that many times, I suppose it always surprises me. Obviously, there are exceptions, but this is what I'm seeing overall. And this is talking about Kumara. Kumara is between the ages of birth and 5. Again, it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada talks about brahmachari life here in this purport, which actually technically would start at age 5. Prabhupada really wanted us to have preschools or nursery schools for our children under the age of 5. In fact, he said that the mothers should take care of children. He says it's in a Bhagavatam purport, like teachers take care of children in a nursery school. I personally spent 5 years altogether in different places running schools for children under the age of 5. And one of the things I really liked about doing that is how much I could just focus on Krishna and Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. In fact, I personally haven't found another service where I can do that to the same extent. So, when you're just with little children, 2, 3, 4 years old, you're not under any kind of pressure, unless you're in a really strange community, you're not under any kind of pressure to teach anything practical. No one expects you to teach the 3-year-old how to, and again, unless you're in a strange community, nobody expects you to teach the 3-year-old how to read or how to do mathematics or, how far away Uganda is. That they're not expecting that. They basically just want you to keep the kids happy and safe and healthy. And if they're devotees, they want the kids to learn something about Krishna and do something kind of cute. And that's it. You don't have a whole lot of expectations on you from anybody. And so you can just do things about Krishna. You can just read Krishna conscious stories about Krishna's pastimes. You can do dramas of Krishna's pastimes. You can do puppet shows of Krishna's pastimes. You can make jewelry for your school deities. You can color pictures of Krishna and decorate them with jewels and paper flowers and all kinds of, you can really just be absorbed in Krishna for the entire time. And little kids don't generally, with some exceptions, but little children that age, they don't generally have like issues. They don't even know whether they're boys or girls. It's just extremely simple and about Krishna. And my experience is that the children who got that kind of training when they were very young, that it left a lifetime impression on them. In fact, at least in my very anecdotal experience, I would say that the kids who were in the preschool, that it had more of an effect on them than even the kids who were in the Gurukula. So it's something very important. Prabhupada said that we welcome first day babies in the Bhagavatam class. He talked about bringing children even to the morning program at a very young age. Again, I don't see very many people doing this. I mean, in the early days of the movement, we did this because we all lived in the temple ashram. And if you didn't come to the morning program with your children, you wouldn't be welcome to continue to stay in the ashram. So it was a little bit of a kind of cultish fanaticism. But even those, even when we moved outside, and we would still bring our children to the temple for the morning program. And of course, people can have a morning program in their home where they're including the children. But again, I don't see this happening very often. It kind of started dropping off in the 80s, and it's never come back. Here where I stay, there's a school that does have a sadhana program for the children later in the day, like at 9:30, I think. And there are a few parents who will sometimes bring their children to the temple in the morning, but not so many. So that's, yeah, that early age. It's those early ages before 5 when our brain is just wide open to learning everything, and our general impressions of right and wrong and what life is all about are formed during that time, and we don't remember them being formed, and we're not aware of how much they impact us, but they're very impactful. And Prabhupada talks about in the purport that nowadays, instead of training young children, there's abortion. So, we have so many people fighting for the right to have an abortion, which I think is bizarre. That it's the woman's body. No, it's not the woman's body. It's the baby's body. that any woman who's ever been pregnant can think that the baby's body is part of her body is crazy. I just don't understand it. It's kind of like, I have a room here that I stay in, and if someone else comes into the room with me, they're in my room, but they're their own person, different from my room, and I can't say that, well, you're in my room, I can kill you. Of course, Vedic society also educated children even within the womb. Of course, Prahlad Maharaj, as he's going to talk about later in the next chapter, that Prahlad Maharaj was educated in Krishna consciousness in the womb. One of my former Gurukul students, who was also my student in nursery school, she became my student when she was 2 and is now doing amazing, amazing, amazing preaching. Actually told me that she remembers her father reading Chaitanya Charitamrita out loud when she was in her mother's womb. And she has a memory of that. So that's there. All right, verse 2 tells us how to do our transcendent dharma. And Prabhupada compares this verse to Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvalok Maheshwaram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gyat Vamam Shanti Michati. And Prabhupada writes in this purport about reviving our relationship with Krishna in one of the 5 rasas. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does the same. You can, if you're looking at Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, you'll often and you go back and forth to Prabhupada, you can see how Prabhupada's just pulling from him. And it's kind of fascinating. So yeah, if we look at verse 2, where Prahlad Maharaj said that everyone must engage in devotional service. And yes, let's see. He says, this is another verse where Prabhupada and Prahlad Maharaj, not as explicitly as the verse about iron and a magnet, but sort of a little bit more indirectly, where he says that he's the Priya Atman Eshvara Surit. Yad Esha Sarvabhutanam Priya Atmeshvara Surit. That of all living entities, he's the most dear one. He's the master of the soul. He's the best well-wisher and friend. So that our relationship with Krishna is natural. It's inherent within us. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, maybe I'll share my screen again and we'll just read. Look at the purport together. So this is a recurring theme. Right? The living entity has wandered throughout the universe in different forms of life in different planetary systems, but because he's forgotten his intimate relationship with Vishnu, he's merely suffered life after life. Therefore, the educational system in the human form of life should be so perfect that one will understand his intimate relationship with God or Vishnu. Every living entity has an intimate relationship with God. So Prabhupada's taking this general statement, right, of Prahlad Maharaj, Yad Esa Sarvabhutanam Priya Atmeshvara Surit, a general statement and saying we have our own personal relationship with God. One should therefore glorify the Lord in the adoration of Shantaras, or revive his eternal relationship with Vishnu as a servant in Dasyaras, a friend in Sakyaras, a parent in Vatsalyaras, or a conjugal level in Madhurya Ras. So this is, again, we're looking at recurrent statements and themes throughout Srila Prabhupada's books and lectures, that we have an eternal relationship with the Lord, and it's an individual relationship. So when we're talking about doing devotional service, Prahlad Maharaj is telling us to do devotional service, that becomes very specific for us as we mature in bhakti, that we do devotional service to cultivate and to develop a particular relationship. Okay, now we have the next section of verses is 3 to 5, which is, instead of endeavoring for happiness of the senses that is automatically obtained, one should endeavor for the highest goal. And verse 3 is a verse that Prabhupada often quotes in relationship to not endeavoring for happiness. If distress comes on its own, well, happiness will come on its own too. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting concept that you don't need to work for happiness. Materially speaking, you don't need to work for happiness. That it's you're going to get it. And we all actually experience this, that pleasurable things come, painful things come. And if we're not looking for pain, why do we need to look for happiness? Both of them will come on their own. All we need to look for is Krishna consciousness. And then in verse 4, even if we could, let's say theoretically, you could say, well, I can increase my happiness. That doesn't solve our real problem. Now, this is a very interesting concept. Srila Prabhupada will sometimes give the example that children should go to school because that will enable them to have good occupations, that they think about their future. And he uses that as an analogy for the fact that we should think about our future life. And Prabhupada's very clear. The children should go to school and be educated, so that will increase their happiness in the future. So there are actually things you can do to increase your material happiness. That's what good karma means. If you engage in good karma, you will increase your material happiness. When we say happiness and distress are predestined, they're destined by our own behavior. And not all of that is, last lifetime or 200 lifetimes ago. If I eat too much now, today, I will get a uncomfortable, full feeling in my stomach today. I'll suffer today. And if I don't eat enough today, I'll also suffer. I won't have energy. I won't have mental clarity and so forth. So that's today. That's not how much I eat today and my suffering or enjoyment from that, and what I eat, what I choose to eat is going to affect how much and what is going to affect my happiness very immediately. The same is true with my dealing with another human being. If I'm polite and kind and loving to another human being, then I'm at least much more likely to have a pleasant dealing with that human being immediately in that moment. Not guaranteed, but generally. And if I'm rude and nasty to another human being, I'm likely to get a bad effect again very quickly in that moment. So I can actually increase my happiness and distress, and very much so. It's not that I can't do that, but what is the point? That doesn't really solve our real problem. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, are you contradicting Prahlad Maharaj? Let's think about this for a minute. Although I can increase my happiness or my distress, I increase my happiness by paying for it in some way. So let's use the example of eating. If I'm going to be happy by eating, I have to do some tapasya in my eating. I have to choose to eat the amount of calories that are needed according to my height and body build and level of activity, and I have to choose the kind of foods that are compatible with me. So I have to do some kind of austerity. If I'm going to be nice to people, I also might experience that, at least sometimes, as an austerity. Sometimes I might feel like not being nice to people, but I'm going to take the austerity of being nice to them so that I don't suffer. So austerity is suffering. So I'm paying for my happiness. Therefore, really, my happiness and distress is always equal. And if I go for some immediate happiness, the pleasure of insulting somebody who's been rude to me, or the pleasure of eating very high fat, high sugar foods in large quantities in this moment, then I will pay for that afterwards. So everything becomes balanced. Yes, I can increase my happiness by voluntarily accepting distress. And I can increase my distress by voluntarily taking on happiness that is beyond my allotment. Everything will come back into balance. Just like it's explained that we have money in this life, depending on how charitable we were in previous lives. And there's empirical evidence that our amount of money is also based on how charitable we are in this life. So charitable means I'm giving money away. So if I give money away, I will get more money. Why? Because Krishna is going to give more money to people who are going to give it away. And Krishna is not giving you more money so that you can hoard it or that you can just, buy $4,000 shoes or something. He's giving you more money so that because, you're a charitable person, you're going to use the money to help others. So let me give you more money. So therefore, really, we cannot increase our happiness. We cannot increase our happiness and we cannot increase our distress at all. Materially speaking, it's always going to balance, always. And if you can say that I can get an illusion of an increase of happiness, that doesn't solve your real problems. We might also make the argument that one can increase material happiness by moving up through the gunas. So in Tamagun, everything is just distress. In Rajagun, it's mixed happiness and distress. And in Sattvagun, it's pretty much just happiness. But that's talking about an internal state, not external happenings. So the gunas we're in, we're not so much talking about, how much money you have or how much food you have or what kind of food, but we're talking about how you perceive the world. And the reason that the happiness goes up is that you're getting closer and closer to spiritual consciousness. You're removing layers of false ego. And so while we can say that moving from tamas to rajas or rajas to sattva makes you happier, the mechanism there is related to the spiritual. So that's a different topic. Text 5. Prahlad Maharaj uses this word bhavam ashritaha. Ashritaha means our shelter. And bhava means, is an interesting word. Bhava literally means existence. Bhava can be a form of you, Y-O-U. It means to exist. So bhavam ashrita literally means to take shelter of existence. And the implication given in the context of this verse is it means you're taking shelter of material existence. And Prabhupada says something interesting in the purport. And it's interesting from 2 points of view. He says, for one word in this verse, there are 2 readings, bhavam ashritaha and bhayam ashritaha. Of course, bhayam means fear. He says, but accepting the meaning of either of them will bring one to the same conclusion. Bhayam ashritaha indicates that the materialistic way of life is always fearful, because at every step there is danger. Materialistic life is full of anxieties and fear, bhayam. Similarly, accepting the reading bhavam ashritaha, the word bhavam refers to unnecessary trouble and problems. For want of Krishna consciousness, one is put into bhavam, being perpetually embarrassed by birth, death, old age, and disease. Thus, one is surely full of anxiety. So many, many, many interesting points here. First one is that there are sometimes alternate versions of Bhagavatam verses. Sometimes there are alternate versions of the Bhagavatam where an entire verse is added or subtracted. So there are some places where Prabhupada will say, in this chapter, in some versions of the Bhagavatam, in this chapter, there's these 2 extra verses. Or in some version of the Bhagavatam, this verse is not quoted. Or here we have that in some versions, there's a different word. So why is this important? One of our valid criticisms of some of the religions of the world is that those religions have a very difficult time historically authenticating their holy scriptures. Just like if you want to take the New Testament of Christianity, to authenticate that what's quoted in there is actually the words of Jesus is impossible to do historically speaking. You just can't do it. It was a very interesting find in Israel many years ago, and when I was a child, of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this was parchment by the Dead Sea in Israel, and the atmosphere there is very dry, and the air is different because of the chemical composition of the Dead Sea. And so this parchment was very well preserved, and it had texts from parts of the Old Testament of the Bible where they could compare the current version to the old version, and they were able to see that most of what they had in the current version was still the same as it was thousands of years previously. The way that people used to make books is they would write them by hand. So some books, like the Old Testament, were written on parchment, which is derived, I'm pretty sure, from sheepskin. It's a particular kind of paperish. It's not leather exactly. It's processed differently than leather. The Egyptians wrote on papyrus leaves, and in India they wrote also on leaves, on palm leaves and other leaves. Now, duh, how long are leaves going to stay? The leaves, they're not very durable. And so the book has to be rewritten over and over again. And we all know that if you're copying something, you may make a mistake. In fact, you will make a mistake, and you're going to copy something incorrectly. Now, obviously, if you have several different people copying something in different places, so the mistakes they make will be different from one another. And how do we know that our scripture is actually, that the Bhagavatam we're reading today is the same Bhagavatam that was written down thousands of years ago? How do we know that? Well, the main way that we know that is that there are 81, I believe, commentaries on the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And in those commentaries, they're quoting the verses. Just like in Srila Prabhupada's books, he's quoting the verse, and then he's giving his commentary, which he called his purports. So similarly, the other commentators, they do the same thing. They quote the verse, and then they give their commentary. And you can see that over the centuries, the same verses are being quoted, because not only is the Bhagavatam being rewritten, but the commentaries are being copied. And we see that they're referring to the same verses, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's a word that's different, or a verse that's different, or a verse that's added, or a verse that's subtracted. And these are then noted. The commentators are noting this, that they're not sure what was the original one. They're not sure if Bhavan or Bhayam was the original, so they're commenting on both. Now, please take note. Such is not the case with the huge volume of what we call Vedic literature. There's 108 Upanishads, there's 18 Puranas, there's Itihasas, and so forth and so on. Most of those have no commentary at all. So it is therefore impossible to know whether or not we're dealing with the original material. Now, what you can tell is which Puranas are quoted by our acharyas and which verses they quote. Of course, sometimes that's difficult because, like, Madhvacharya particularly quotes slokas that nobody can find, that whatever he was quoting from doesn't seem to exist anymore. I mean, this is also a problem, that if people stop copying something, then the leaves disintegrate, and then it's just gone. So with a lot of these other scriptures, we don't know whether or not the verses we have today are the original authentic verses. So be careful. If you find devotees are quoting slokas from other parts of the Vedic canon, and if it's not verses that are quoted over time by acharyas, and if that literature itself has no commentary, proceed with great caution. All right, let's look at the content here. How strange! Taking shelter of fear? Taking shelter of material existence? This is my shelter? How weird is that? You know, most of us, fear is a rasa, and most of us get some pleasure from fear. We translate fear into excitement. And so people like to watch, a movie that will make them feel fearful, or go to an amusement park ride that makes them feel fearful. People do enjoy fear. It's a secondary enjoyment in people playing sporting events or watching sporting events. Certainly, certain sports are very much connected with enjoying the kind of rush of fear. And a lot of what motivates materialistic people is attachment to material existence. I want to continue in this body, with this family, in this place, doing this thing. I'm attached to this. This is my shelter, my home, my body, my family. And maintaining them and keeping everything healthy is my motive for action. And a lot of times we also motivate ourselves with fear. I have to work hard, otherwise I won't have enough money to pay my bills. And then I'll be living out on the street and I'll be homeless and nobody will love me and everything will fall apart. And, I'm driving my car motivated by fear. I want to make sure that I don't get in an accident and crash and then I don't get hurt. And the impetus for a lot of our behavior, how I deal with other people, I'm watching what I say and how I say it and how I relate to them, because I'm afraid that if I don't do it properly, they won't like me anymore and I'll have. So those are actually our shelters. My dear friends, they don't need to be our shelters. We do not need to be attached to material existence, nor to be fearful in order to do the right thing. That's not necessary. We can do the right thing with another motive. And Prabhupada talks about in this verse 5, that we should do Varnashrama Lord with devotional service. So it's not that we shouldn't do our activities in this world. There is a place for that. We have some devotees who've lived as avadutas, Jad Bharata, and lived as an avaduta his whole life. Prahlad Maharaj came upon an avaduta in the forest. We have some devotees who lived as avadutas at the end of their life, like the Pandavas and Maharaj Rishabdev. But generally speaking, devotees do their, what Prabhupada would call prescribed duties or occupational duties. I remember when I first read that when I was in college, prescribed duties. I couldn't understand that phrase. Prescribed by whom? Prescribed duties. What are my prescribed duties? It didn't make any sense to me. So what do we do in Varna and Ashram? What do we do according to our basic temperament? Do we do Brahmin duties, Kshatriya duties, Vaishya duties, or Shudra duties? And what do we do according to our place in the life cycle? Are we studying? Are we taking care of a family? Are we retired, or are we preparing for death? So then we have different duties to do according to our place in the Varnas and in the ashram. But we should do that with devotional service. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this verse can refer to worshiping the Lord out of fear of material existence. That because I'm afraid of suffering in this world, because I'm afraid of rebirth, therefore I should worship the Lord. And that is obviously a much lower stage of worship than worshiping out of love. Because everything we do out of fear or material attachment, we could do the same activities, even better, out of love. I could drive my car safely because I love myself, I love my passengers, I love everyone else on the road. and I love Krishna. I could take care of my family and my home and so forth because, I love Krishna and I see that all of this is Krishna's. So that's, I could be nice to people because I love them rather than because I'm afraid of the consequences of socially inappropriate behavior. So again, I could be motivated by love. I could be motivated by happiness, and I could be taking shelter of the internal energy rather than the external energy. All right, famous verses here, 6 to 8. How do we mess it up? And Prahlad Maharaj has some interesting mathematics here. Okay, you're going to live for 100 years. Obviously, most of us do not even live for 100 years. I remember on my 50th birthday thinking, I'm not at the halfway mark. I'm way past the halfway mark. The chances I'm going to live to be 100 are small. It's possible. My grandmother lived to 98. But yeah, each of my parents lived to be 89. And I mean, every week, every single week, I hear about some Prabhupada disciple who has died every single week, at least one, sometimes two or three. And then other devotees also who are elderly. I mean, if I scroll through my feeds on social media every day, if I were to take, say, 30 minutes to scroll through my feed on social media every day without fail, there'll be a birth, an engagement, a marriage, a death, every day. So we don't even live for 100 years, but let's say you live for 100 years, 50 years in sleep. Of course, that's a lot. Most of us really don't sleep 12 hours. Most of us sleep 8 or less. So that would be more like 30 years. But let's say 50 years in sleep, 20 years in childhood, 20 years in old age, and the rest in family attachments. It's all gone. In verse 6, there's some discussion about 100 years is relative to the species and planet. So Lord Brahma lives 100 years, but the meaning of 100 years is different. So Lord Brahma can do a lot more in one of his hours than I can do in one of my hours. We all have this experience, right? They say, okay, I got 3 hours to get this done, and boom, it's gone. The 3 hours, like, where did those 3 hours go? When Lord Brahma says, I've got 3 hours to get something done on an absolute platform, he has a lot more time at his hands, although in his world, that's 3 hours for him. In verse 7, Srila Prabhupada describes old age as, quote, one cannot perform any material activities and is full of anxiety about what is to be done by his sons and grandsons and how one's estate should be protected, unquote. So that is often what people are consumed by in old age. You can't do much practical anymore. You can't see as well. You can't hear as well. You can't digest as well. You can't walk as well. And those of us who are experiencing some form of old age will notice this dwindling. Everything dwindles. Like I didn't used to have to wear glasses when I was young. Thankfully, I can hear and I can walk, but I don't have the stamina that I had in a younger body and so forth. And gradually that diminishes and diminishes. And again, just like every week I hear about some devotee who's passed away, often at a far less than 100 years of age. So also I'm constantly hearing about people in old age who are dwindling in some way and their capability, mental capability also dwindling. All right, in text 8, Prabhupada circles back to the idea of taking up devotional life in early childhood. And that such training, if we're trained in early childhood, means we won't waste our life. And he says, if you're in the system of ashram, you avoid wasting your life. Okay, some interesting points is that in verse 1, the normal progression of ages is Kaumara is from 1 to 5 years, Poganda from 5 to 10, Kaishora from 10 to 15, and Yovana above 15 years. So usually when you're 1 to 5, you're not practicing varnashram of any kind. So usually in Kaumara age, you're not you haven't started the brahmacharya ashram yet, and you certainly don't have a varna. You're not doing anything to maintain yourself. So you're outside the range of, interesting, because in our career dharma, we talk about people who are outside the varnas. And we usually refer to students and retired people and old people who are not working in the varnas. We don't usually mention children under the age of 5, but actually children under the age of 5 are also outside of both varna and ashram. So because children under the age of 5 are outside of both varna and ashram, when Prahlad Maharaj is talking about dharma, this is according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when Prahlad Maharaj is talking about dharma, he must be talking about transcendent dharma, because children under the age of 5 don't have any other dharma. I mean, sometimes I'll joke and I'll say the dharma of little children is to be noisy and messy and curious, but they don't really have any dharma. Now, in text 2, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that verse 2 is quote, an order to perform raga bhakti. And again, we talked about how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Prabhupada talks about the rasas. And text 5, we already mentioned, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this is about worshiping the Lord out of fear of material existence, which indicates Vaidhi Bhakti. So, long discussion, which we're not going to have right at this moment, is that Vaidhi Bhakti is performed mostly out of fear, and faith in the scriptures, faith in Guru, and fear of material existence, and Raga Bhakti is performed mostly out of raga, which means attachment, and love. The motive is different. Okay, we're taking our break. So if in India, you're breaking until 6:30, and the rest of the world, unless maybe you're in Nepal, you're breaking to the top of the hour, whatever time it is for you, which will be 8 o'clock here. Okay, please take a break. And a real break. Take a real break. Get out of your seat. Move. Krishna. Okay, so let's continue. Now we're answering the question, how can we best use our life? Looking at verses 1 to 2, what's the true purpose of education? Any thoughts? Okay, revival of our relationship, one's eternal relationship with the Lord. That's very much from verse 2, isn't it? Yes. Okay, other thoughts? Engagement, devotional service, okay. Be the best version of ourselves, yes. Only chance to return back home, hear about the Lord. Okay. Humble servant of the Lord and his devotees, okay. Not so much in verses 1 and 2, though. So you want to look for verses. I'm asking this question based on verses 1 and 2. Going back to God and engage in our loving service with the Lord. You know, when Prabhupada's talking about the famous verse, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, Yato Bhakti Hoksajaya Hokdukiya Pritiyata Yadatma Suprasidati, he's saying that the Bhagavatam is very liberal. It's not promoting a particular religion. It's saying you've got a good religion if it teaches you to love God. Param Dharma, yes. So if we fall in love with God, especially to revive our relationship with Krishna. Okay. So Prabhupada compares verse 2 to Bhagavad Gita 5:29. Right? So why does Srila Prabhupada make that comparison? Why is Prabhupada comparing verse 2 to 5:29?
In the verse itself, it says that devotional service is natural because Lord Vishnu is the most beloved master and well-wisher. Suhidam Sarvabhutanam.
Okay.
These are already mentioned in the verse. That's why Prabhupada is quoting that. Bhaktanam Jagnatapasam.
Okay. Sitarani?
Because Prabhupada is saying that the revival of one's relationship with Vishnu is actually the purpose of the human form of life, and that is the only way to enjoy transcendental happiness. And also because he's our ever well-wisher, he's our well-wishing friend. So if we revive our relationship with him, and since he's the proprietor of everything, we can experience that transcendental happiness. And 529 talks about how Krishna himself says that I am the well-wishing friend, and I am Surhid, and I am the supreme lord of all planets. So that is why Prabhupada is relating this with that particular verse.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Anybody want to look at the Sanskrit for each? It's very easy because Prabhupada's quoting 529 in the purport. So if we look at the Sanskrit, especially the last two lines. So in verse 2, we have the last two lines are like this. And in 529, the first three lines are like this. Advaita Krishna Prabhu, yeah?
Hare Krishna. Since the Lord is Maheshwaram and is also best friend, we can live both the material prosperity and spiritual prosperity.
Okay.
A bit greedy, but
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? If you look at the Sanskrit, tell me any parallels here. It's in the chat.
In the verse in Bhagavatam, Yad Esha Sarvabhutanam, all Jivatmas. And here he says Sarvaloka. So it's again, and he also says, Sudha Sarvabhutanam is the same word.
Okay. You've got Asha and Asha, the controller, Isha.
Yeah, Yad Esha.
So we have Sarva, Asha Sarva Bhutanam, or Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Loka can also mean people. So the controller of all people. And then we have the Surit and Surit. What about the Bhoktaram? Do we have anything that might imply Bhoktaram in verse 2? Yeah, it's in the chat. You can just look right in the chat. We also have another Ishvara, right? Atmeshwaram. Atmeshwara. So we have the controller twice. But anything about Bhoktaram, that he's the enjoyer?
Mataji, this first word is Esha. Esha means this. And
Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Ishvara is the controller. So we don't
Yes,
have
you're
two
right.
actually.
You corrected me. Yeah. So we have Atmeshwar. Yes. Thank you for correcting. As
but you have Yad Esha. Yad Esha, because, and why? Because he's Purusha, so it is linked. So
well,
Yad
you have
also,
Atma Ishvara. You have Atma Ishvara, so you have the Ishvara there.
I mean, I'm talking about Purusha, Bhoktaram. Yad Esha Sarva Bhutanam. Yad is relating to because of him being Purusha.
Oh, so you could also have that. Okay. So Purusha also indicates, but you have Atma Ishvara also relates to Maheshwaram. I'm wondering if Priya relates to Bhoktaram. If someone's very dear to you, then you want them to enjoy your activities. It's kind of a little bit of a stretch, but a little bit of an extrapolation. But I'm just wondering if we could say that. All right. And thank you for correcting me. All right. So why is endeavoring for sense pleasure not required? From text 3, why do we not need to endeavor for sense pleasure? I mean, that's like our whole life, isn't it? Isn't that what we're doing like every minute of her life is trying to get some kind of pleasure for our senses and mind. And he's saying, you don't need to do that. So why not? Sham Kishore, yes.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
So from my perspective, I think it's like how Prahlad Maharaj explains it, it's a very statistical way. The best way to understand it is by understanding the reverse. Sadness comes, everybody in this world, nobody's trying to get for becoming sad, but in all our lives, sadness or reversals come. So it's the same logic. Like we can understand it by the contrary logic, by the reverse logic. So basically, just like we're not trying to be sad, but still we are getting sad. So we are falsely thinking that because of my endeavors, I can become happy. So basically, it's in a way telling us that we are not really in control of the situations, and happiness and distress are, these are just things. That's how just the world is. It comes to you like a random variable, if a statistician would say something like that.
Okay, so now I'd like to ask, what does this mean practically? So just like on the break, I'm living at a temple, and the temple building is a 30-second walk from my room, and at the bottom of the temple building is where they serve prasadam, and it's they bring out the breakfast at about 7:45 in the morning. So during the break, I went to the temple and I took my little bowl with me, and I saw what was available. There was some barley and chickpea and vegetable soup, and there was a fruit cobbler. And I had already prepared some avocado salad for my Sheilas before our class. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't really want to eat this cobbler. It's too sweet. It's just going to make me feel tired. And what would go best? Usually I take fresh fruit. They also have fresh fruit. Usually I take fresh fruit, but I didn't. I thought, well, I've got avocado salad. If I have the soup, that'll go well with the avocado salad. And so I took a bowl of soup, which I'll eat those after our class is over. So wasn't I thinking about how to maximize my happiness when I'm going there? And it's extremely cold here, like extremely. So like even to be out just for 30 seconds, walk there and back, I put on a very warm jacket. And some of the devotees there who are a little bit further walk, they were there in their full-on padded, full-length coats with, padded hoods. And it seems to me that we were all endeavoring for happiness. So what does this verse mean practically? Some thoughts?
So again, Mataji, I would think over here, like our happiness and distress should not be state specific. So while you're trying for, whatever the endeavor is being made to get that right kind of the prasadam, but if it's not there also, that should not affect our happiness, distress. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yadricho labha santushto. So, what comes of its own accord to be satisfied. But, we do make the effort, but, if it doesn't happen, our happiness should not be state dependent. It should be state independent. So.
Wow. That is really nice. So we make the effort, but with detachment for the result. So I make the effort to put on warm clothes, and I make the effort to choose something to eat that's going to be compatible and healthy and so forth. But my happiness is not dependent on that. Okay, I like that, to be state independent, to have happiness with them. Let's see what people have written here. Depends on the motivation. Am I trying to care for my body and mind to serve better? Well, that's definitely at least part of it. Happiness for sense gratification have a different motivation. So here we come again to what's driving me. Why am I putting on the warm clothing? Why am I choosing the barley and chickpea soup over the fruit cobbler? What's driving me? Actually, the fruit cobbler would probably taste better, but it wouldn't actually be, I'm sure it would taste better, but it wouldn't actually be favorable for me today. Hankering and planning are useless. All right, interesting. Narada Rishi is saying that. There's a verse that I quote in my seminar on sex desire, where Prabhupada says the way we can get rid of kama is to plan for Krishna, to make plans for Krishna service. Okay, so we have to, Prema Manjari is saying we have to take care of our basic needs in order to please the Lord. So we keep coming back to this same idea that it's not so much what you're doing, but why you're doing it. Shouldn't make, okay, in Nectar of Instruction, verse 2, shouldn't make extra efforts which are unnecessary. Right? So it's not like if I went to the temple and there was nothing there that I liked, it's not that I have to, get in a car and drive to a grocery store and buy something, so I don't have to make some big endeavor, whatever comes as part of my service. All right, I like that. Okay. And then I talked about this in the first part of the class. Can we affect our happiness and distress at all?
What do you mean by can we affect?
Can you decrease distress and increase happiness on the material level? Can you do? All right, do you have the capability of doing that? Because it seems that Sri Prahlad Maharaj is saying that you can't. I mean, it sounds almost like from this verse that somebody else has already decided how much we're going to have happiness and distress materially, and when we're just sort of going along with it. Okay.
I think it's more to
Krishna. Yes.
our use of time, how we are using time. If you're engaged in endeavor, over endeavoring for material happiness, don't waste time on this kind of stuff. But as far as daily decision making is concerned, like about should I eat this, should I eat that, of course we have to use our intelligence. It's not like we can leave it, okay, it's going to come regardless, whatever I put in the mouth, doesn't matter.
I will guarantee you that if I had filled my bowl with halva, which was also there at the table and which I took none of, I would absolutely guarantee you that if I took as large of a quantity of halva as I took of barley soup, and then if I took another bowl of similar quantity of the fruit cobbler, I would absolutely guarantee you that I would significantly impact my happiness temporarily and significantly impact my distress afterwards. Sri Radha Govind.
Hare Krishna. So I was thinking of, in astrology, certain people, they just don't have the capacity to reach that state of mind of being happy, regardless of what kind of material facilities they may have, a perfect spouse, perfect children. So happiness is a state of mind, and it's not actually dependent on what kind of food. So I'd like to give an analogy of the kitchen and the ability to cook. So if we think that if I can have a fantastic kitchen with all facilities, it doesn't necessarily guarantee making a good meal. But if somebody knows how to cook, they can make a meal with a hole in the ground and picking up firewood from the forest. So I would say happiness is more state of mind, is the ability to cook rather than what kind of kitchen I can actually put together.
Okay. All right. Well, then you're talking about something that I alluded to earlier, that happiness depends on your situation in the gunas, which is what a lot of you are writing in the chat also, that happiness is as you progress through the gunas, you're going to experience happiness. Sam Kishore.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So, Mataji, I think like the act of chasing happiness sows the seeds of your distress. Like again in Bhagavad Gita 5.22, it says, Jahi samsparsha ja bhoga dukha yonyo evata. So as we try to gratify our senses, we try to chase happiness, that in itself has the seeds of distress in our life.
Okay. Happiness is also a choice, yes. And Shakti Mata says, in material life, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, depends on our mindset. That is absolutely a true statement. However, it's not something that's necessarily easy to realize. And it doesn't always appear to be true. It appears that some suffering is objective. So it is though absolutely true that our experience of pain and suffering is entirely subjective. It is not objective. Having a broken leg is not objective pain. How much one experiences pain from a broken leg is entirely subjective. But it doesn't appear like that. So it appears that things are, and Sri Radha Govinda was making the point that there are people who don't seem to be able to experience happiness. You know, this was one of the types of persons described in the conversation between Krishna and the gopis in chapter 32 of the 10th canto, that there are people who are just so ungrateful that they, and I know a devotee like this, where, you know, there was something that she wanted for years. I mean, we are talking years, 10, 15 years, maybe 20. I mean, she wanted it for years. And it just happened. Finally, it just happened. And I was trying to celebrate with her. And I'm like, wow, you know, this thing that you wanted. And it was something in bhakti. It wasn't like a thing. It was 100% in bhakti. And I said, you know, this thing you wanted to happen and you've tried for and you've worked for, it's happened. See, look, there it is in front of you. It's happening. And my mood was very celebratory. And her response to that is, well, this and this and this and this and this still haven't happened. And I was, as they say, gobsmacked. I'm thinking, my God, lady, let yourself celebrate. What is your problem? So, you know, of course, people behave like that because they're thinking, well, if I celebrate, then I won't try for these other things as well. And I have to be beating myself up constantly in order to constantly strive for something else. But yeah, so how much we experience happiness and distress definitely depends on our consciousness. But if we want to look at the external things, if we want to not look at consciousness, if we want to look at the external things, do I have a warm place to stay on this very cold day? Do I have clean clothes to wear? Do I have healthy food to eat? That kind of thing. Can we affect that? Yes, Prasant Modani. Yes, always nice to have your contributions.
Mataji, I had a question here regarding the example that you just shared. How much of it is nature versus nurture? Because I have seen around me, some people are just wired to be more chill, more with the flow, my wife being one of them, and some are just not. So, and how much of it is our own consciousness?
Well, I'm going to ask this question of Sri Radha Govinda, our resident astrologer. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I would say it's a psychological pattern. Like you were giving an example, Mother Urmila, about wealth. People who are generous, they tend to have wealth. So it's like it's like a psychological pattern. So if in our previous lives we've been grateful, we've done some good stuff, then in this lifetime we could have an attitude, good Venus, meaning ability to make good choices that bring us happiness. And if somebody has a bad Venus, they tend to make bad choices and then they become miserable. So it's a pattern. It's not just some karmic thing that drops on our head, but it's a psychological mindset. And like I said, like I wrote in the chat that some people really like to punish themselves. They're very pessimistic maybe. They like to, like you mentioned in an earlier example, oh, but yeah, it happened, but not exactly the way I wanted it. So it's almost like they want to punish themselves. They don't want to be happy. So it's like a choice of not one. And they're also afraid
that to be changed in this life. It's interesting you say about Venus, because I've always considered my super excellent Venus to be mostly related to the fact that I like beauty in my life. I could show you all the pretty pictures I have here in my little place. And
it's a superficial, or like not superficial, but it's an external reflection of ability to make good choices, that you also have a good taste in beauty. But the deeper meaning is the ability to make right choices.
Okay, so to what extent can a person change that in this life? Like the devotee I was talking to is probably even a little older than I am, and has been in the movement as long as I have. And when I tried to bring this to her attention maybe a year ago, she just got very angry with me. So, she just got like really, really angry and really, really offended. And she had said to me, what could I do to improve myself? And I said, you could have a more positive outlook and not be so negative and critical and sarcastic. And for weeks she was furious with me. So
Yeah.
I think this question by Prasant Prabhu, to what extent can I adjust this? If I notice, well, I just tend to focus on the negative and I'm just beating myself up and I'm not finding happiness in the things that come to me. What can I do something about this, or am I just stuck in that place?
No, I mean, nothing is like etched in stone. Karma is just reflects our way we've been making those choices. But if I change it today, I can. And like, to give the example of this lady, perhaps depending on which planet leads, which is a positive planet in her chart or in her nature, if she's more, let's say, social or communicative, then I would give an advice to make that planet lead her so that the other planets will follow. And maybe, like, for example, if she's a person who's worried about image, then I'd use that to convince her that, in order for you to be accepted by these people, maybe you want to express more gratitude or something like that. I don't know who's this person. I don't know the situation, but I try to do that personally. I try to put my planet, the good planet, in the front. The rest will follow. But if I try to put the difficult planet, the one that's not at peace, then everybody else kind of gets polarized and there's difficulty. So I'd say, like, take advantage of what is strong in her. If she's pessimistic, take that pessimism to convince her something. Yeah.
So you lead with your strength.
Lead with your strength, yes.
Lead with your strength. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was just actually using that the other day with someone. I don't remember the exact situation, but yeah, where I was taking, if you really care about this, then then you would do this. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you could say, if you really want to fix all the problems, if you really want to focus on the problems and fix all the problems, then one of the ways to do that is to celebrate the wins.
Yeah. I mean, in my astrological consultation, sometimes I tell people, let's say they're spilling their feminine energy, sleeping around or whatever. And then when I tell them, instead of telling them you should follow regulative principles, feed them like that and say, if you actually hold this energy, you may have a better chance to get a good husband, because you need to have the credits of good Venus. So sometimes, like, you can enjoy better. You'll have a good family life. Actually control your activities. So it's just like trying to tell a toddler, 2-3-year-old.
How the Bhagavatam works with all of the benedictory verses, right?
Exactly.
Exactly how it works. Yes, Nilamani.
Hi, Shrimati. On this discussion, I was thinking of Krishna's words in chapter 2, Matyaspashya Sukuntila, right? Sri Krishna's Vidvila. Like, the whole objective is to be trying equanimous in happiness and distress, and seeing them as really on a relative scale. It's not that much different whether you're feeling happiness or distress, and is it really happiness and distress that you're feeling? It's just something that at the bodily level kind of thing, right? So that to me is a more kind of absolute perspective to try and develop, right?
Yes. And the irony, if you do that, if you cultivate detachment from happiness and distress, that pushes you into sattva-gun. And if you're in sattva-gun, you're going to feel happy. The nature of sattva-gun is to feel happy. So when we detach from the externals, do I have a warm room or a cold room? And is there something I like to eat or something I don't like to eat? Is somebody nice to me? Is someone not nice to me? When I detach myself from that, and I go into sattva-gun, and then I become happy. So that's we have that nice verse that's coming up later, that as soon as we look for happiness, we lose it, which was already alluded to. Okay. I'm going to jump to the end and then go back again. So looking at the last 3 verses where Prahlad Maharaj is talking about time. So can you explain why now is the time, Tata Jnana Vignasa, that one should actually inquire into the absolute truth now? Why can we say now is the time? Whether we're talking to a 5-year-old or a 95-year-old, why would we say now is the time to strongly endeavor for spiritual advancement? And how much time does a human actually have? So, well, let's do one question at a time. Suppose you're talking to someone. Now is the time. What does that mean? Now is the time. Do it now. And I'd like everyone to answer this, please, at least in the chat.
Because this is an emergency.
It's an emergency. All right. Again, I'd like everyone to give an answer to this. Oh, it's already very late. We've been in so many births and deaths. Oh, I like this from Prima Manjari. We only have now to act. Okay, very nice. Death can come at any time because the human body is very suitable. It's the best investment. Oh, I like that. Better late than never. When you drive on the road up to Tirumala from Tirupati, on this very windy road where they're trying to convince you to drive slowly, there's signs that say better late than never, which means better you arrive late at the top by going carefully than if you're not careful and you fall off the mountain. Living in the present shows our full dependence, or the presence. I'm not sure, Advaita Krishna, if you meant presence, that spelling of presence, but I really like that, living in the presence. And I'm going to steal that with your permission, Advaita Krishna, because I think you might have meant living in the present, S-E-N-T, but you wrote living in the presence, which means being in the presence.
I mean,
of
in
God.
the present,
Yeah, but
time.
this works. This works. Living in the presence of God. Wow, I really like that. So both present and presence, because Krishna consciousness is urgent. If not now, then when? That was said by a famous Jewish philosopher, Maimonides. If not now, then when? There may not be a tomorrow. We are not sleeping now. Let's see, Prabhu says, now we're with the Bhagavatam. We're not sleeping. All right, next big question I'd also like everyone to answer. How much time do we actually have in human life? How much time do we actually have? And take a few minutes and do your own mathematical calculations, all right? I want you to just spend a minute or two. Do your own mathematical calculations. I want this to be a mathematical calculation. You can even Google something if you want. Life expectancy. What's your life expectancy? It's going to be a little different according to your gender. How many hours do you spend sleeping? How much time do you spend just in life stuff like showering and laundry and getting dressed and that kind of thing? How much time do you have? So figure out how much time you have average per day and how many days you have, and then figure it out, and let's get a mathematical equation. How much time do you actually have in a human life? Oh, I want you to figure it out mathematically, Shakti Manta. I want you to answer it in terms of Prahlad Maharaj's calculations in verses 6 to 8. I'm asking this relative, I mean, that's a fine philosophical answer, but that's not what I'm asking. You're answering the wrong question. It's a great answer, but that's not what I'm asking. To the previous question. So for this question, I'd like you to do your own. Prahlad Maharaj has done a mathematical calculation in text 6 to 8. I would like you to do your own mathematical calculation.
Mataji, my estimate, as per the statistics, male US in US males live an average 74.8 years.
Okay,
So
now figure out how many hours you have in a day and multiply it. How much time did you have in your lifetime? And then you can also figure out from your age how much time do you have left.
Yeah, so say I am 58, so I have 17 years left. That's about it. And after
Okay,
17,
but now I want to know how much per day, because he's also talking about, Prahlad Maharaj is also talking about how much time we spend sleeping and so forth. Do the rest of the math and then put it in the chat. Okay, 90-year lifespan. Most people don't live 90 years unless you have 90 years left according to your current age. Okay, so how much do you have? Okay, Prasad, you're giving me a combination of positives and negatives. I want you to end up with a number. How many hours, or how many, you can do it in hours or you can do it in days. A total answer. Please, everyone put it in the chat. Mahalakshmi, I don't want you just copying what Prahlad Maharaj said. I already know what Prahlad Maharaj says. I want you to do the math and figure it out.
60 was pretty.
You have not copied. Well, Prahlad said 50 years sleeping. Oh, you're putting together eating, caring for the body. You're putting that all together as 50 years. And you're not doing the whole math. Okay, Sri Radhagovinda, 80 years, 24 hours a day. How many hours? Okay, but Sri Radhagovinda, you've got to then subtract sleeping and bodily care. So how many actual functional hours do you have? Okay, Sitarani got it, an actual number of hours. Is that your total life, Sitarani, or is that how much you have left?
How much I have left?
How much you've left, eh? That's pretty good. All
Actually,
right.
when we divide by years, it's not much math.
Okay, well, do that. Do that division and then look at that. Okay, here we have Radhika's really, she's doing what I asked. There, you look at this. Okay. Excellent. Wow. Very cool. Radhika's really done a good job here. All right, Sri Radhagovinda, excellent. Sri Radhagovinda, you want to translate that maybe into days? I hope none of you have math trauma. I hope I'm not triggering any of you who hated math when you went to school. It's too complicated. Okay, Ekanta, Google life expectancy.
Yes, I know this, but for me, it's very difficult to count all this
Okay,
sleeping
let's do it.
eating time, and
Google life expectancy. What's your life expectancy?
about
Okay.
70 years.
About 70 years.
I
Okay.
think so.
And how old, how, if you don't mind, you don't have to answer this, but how old do you have left?
20, 25.
Okay, 25 years. Okay, so then each day, figure out about how many hours you spend sleeping and taking care of the body and stuff like that. So let's say you spend like 7 hours sleeping and then another 2 hours just on bodily maintenance. So that's a little bit more than a third. So then you can subtract a third from that amount and see what you have left.
This exercise of yours is going to make optimistic parts of us become pessimistic, realizing how little time I have left. If that was your goal, you're successful.
I've ruined everything I did in the previous discussion, huh? All right, well,
I see it more simply for me because I'm kind of older, and I do 3.5 hours sadhana and 4-5 hours service. And if I live 10 years, that's how many hours I have. Simple.
Well, very nice.
The rest that's the way I look at it. Because I do 3.5 hours sadhana and 4 to 5 hours service, and the rest is wasted. So, and if I live 15 years, I'm happy. Simple.
Okay. Okay, let's put a positive spin on this so that Sri Radha Govinda will actually believe that I have an exalted Venus nicely placed, which I do. All right, let's put a positive spin on this. So let's look at, okay, what would I like to do to make the most of what I have? What would I like to do to make the most of what I have? How can I use this nicely?
In Bhagavatam class for the rest of my life.
Anyone else's thoughts? What can I do to make the most of whatever I have left? Of course, we don't know how much we have left because we don't know when we're going to die. So this is a good estimate. Oh, very nice. Okay, other thoughts?
Seva, in the community, Krishna conscious community, and engage in it with full attention, full force.
Okay. Beautiful. And Sri Radha Govinda, you're going to have to blame Prahlad Maharaj for the negativity there. I'm sorry. You can't blame me for that. I'm supposed to be teaching the verses. I just got to do it.
My concern with this whole discussion and the focus was, I mean, okay, I may have a opinion that chanting or doing a specific sadhana is the best productive use of time. But what if Krishna has a different plan, like putting us through certain kind of austerities, either with family or with raising kids or different things that we may not categorize as directly inherently spiritual, but what if that's Krishna's plan? So I feel like I cannot judge. I cannot be the right judge to say this is a waste, because I think it would be like superficial to think in that way as Vaishnavas.
Okay, I like that. And that's going to segue into my next question, which is related to verse 8. That how does the system of ashram dharma, particularly, I mean, you could say varna and ashram, but Prabhupada's particularly talking about ashram dharma, how does that system prevent us from wasting our time? And ashram dharma is connected with exactly the kind of things that you're talking about. Yes, live in line with our predetermined talents, career dharma, and service for the greater good. Excellent. Some other thoughts about particularly ashram dharma, because Prabhupada's talking, you could relate varna dharma as well. How does that help us to not waste our time? Ashram dharma is a little different from, the things that you all been listing and really relates to Sri Radha Govinda's point. Discipline, focus. Mahalakshmi, you're basically repeating my question. My question is, how does following the dharma of our ashram keep us from wasting our time? And you're saying by following the dharma of our ashram. So yes, very good. And how does that help us from wasting our time? Oh, I like this. We know our proclivities don't need to search for direction in life. Right focus. I like this. Prevents the mind from getting distracted to useless things. Yes. Get students to study, grahastas to raise Krishna conscious children, elderly to detach, let young people live their lives their way, and when they're old, just remain in thoughts of the Lord, respecting time. Yes, we don't have to search for what to do. Very nice. Ashram Dharma is very much about time. Prabhupada's talking about Gajendra being in his element. Very good. Ashram Dharma is very much about time. It's about the time of our biological life, our life cycle. And Prahlad Maharaj is listing the different parts of the life cycle and saying, if you're doing it for sense gratification, it's a waste. And Prabhupada's answer is, don't stop doing it, but do it for Krishna. Could you even sleep for Krishna? Could we sleep for Krishna? Yes. Can we shower for Krishna? Can we do our laundry for Krishna? Can we shop for Krishna? Prabhupada says in 12.2 that when you're going out to purchase something for Krishna, you're in samadhi. Oh, Prasant, yes. A little, a little edgy, but yes. Yes, and then we're not wasting our time even when we're sleeping, folks. Look at that. Even when we're doing our laundry, even when we're cleaning the floor, even when we're brushing our teeth.
Mataji, I realize it's a bit edgy, but the reason I do is I worry about the society right now. There are like I had a child later in my life, so he's only 3. But all my friends, their children are early teenagers, and they're already thinking about sex, and they're already getting sex education in the US-based schools, and so that's that's not optimizing for the stage of their life, because as per the Varnashrama, they should be right now in brahmacharya mode, focusing on their studies, and then there will be a time to have sex and Krishna conscious babies, and all of that is out of the window. Where instead of abstinence, they are teaching, well, if you use this, then you won't have a baby, or like it's just messed up. I feel very strongly about these things, and then in New York Times, a very respected newspaper, there are tips on how seniors can still enjoy sex. And the seniors probably don't need, I mean, again, I'm going off topic, but my point is the whole society is like
not off topic at all, because that's the topic, is that how do we engage in ashram dharma? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's just that those articles and opinion pieces really worry me a lot. Like my parents are older, they are now 76 and 78. They don't think in these terms. So clearly something was working right at a particular stage of the society, or maybe them being in India, and something is broken. And then, yeah. So,
yes, modern society is, and what you're pointing out is one reason why I'm teaching more Varna Dharma than Ashram Dharma, because people are still very open, and Prabhupada said first Varna, then Ashram. People are very open to Varna Dharma, but they're not very open to Ashram Dharma. And the concept that one looks at the different proper stages of life and acts accordingly spiritually is not so popular, even among devotees. I mean, I see devotees getting married in their 60s and 70s. Hare Krishna. So, yeah. I'm saying it's edgy because of what's going on in modern society, not that it's edgy because it's not true. All right, I have a difficult question. I love asking difficult questions. And those of you who sign up for my classes, you probably already know what you're getting into, I suppose. So in his purport to verse 6, Srila Prabhupada calls eating, sleeping, sex, and fear, quote, bodily necessities. He uses the word necessity. And this is not an isolated instance. Srila Prabhupada will use the word need and necessities for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And yet he says that we should reduce these. And Sri Radhagovinda, my answer to your question is just tell them to chant Hare Krishna. Because I don't have time to give it a decent answer. So how do we reduce something that's a necessity? What does this mean? We have these two things stated in the Shastra and by Prabhupada and our acharyas all the time. These are bodily necessities. These are necessities in life. Reduce them. How do you reduce something that's a necessity? Prema Manjari.
It is a necessity in the bodily concept of life. So we can reduce by elevating our consciousness. So persons who are highly elevated in their consciousness, for them, this need reduces all the way to 0 when they are on the transcendental level.
Any other thoughts? Simple living.
It's like
take this at the temple and not drive off to a restaurant. Yes, Advaita Krishna Prabhu.
well, it's like I like my situation. I have nothing else to do except do what I'm doing right now. So I use maybe a couple of hours to go walking and to do this and that. But ideally I would have loved to go traveling. But then I always feel like if I'm traveling, I'm wasting a lot of my time, and therefore I cut down on traveling a lot. because I feel like I've stayed in one place. I can chant more, I can read more, I can teach more, I can study more. So, it's then everything is settled and set up. And I have one older friend of mine. He's very, very fixed up devotee, Prabhupada disciple. He never ever travels. He says, I serve Krishna in separation, even if I don't go to Vrindavan. He says, because I can take the time for chanting.
Interesting.
Well,
maybe that will be my life someday. At this point in my life, I actually maximize my service when I travel. But yeah, okay. For me, my service is maximized when I'm traveling, and when I'm staying in one place, it's not. When I'm staying in one place, I have to work much, much harder to maximize my service. Suchi Priyarada.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. I was just thinking, like, we have practical examples of Srila Prabhupada, like minimized sleep just for 2 hours, because when one is engrossed in service, it really reduces. And we see Raghunath Das Goswami having only, this buttermilk. So we ourselves also see, like, when we are into services, like when it's the day of Janmashtami, we hardly have anything, and we are whole day into services, and we hardly get to know, like, and the day is over. And yeah, we have experiences of these things. That's what I wanted to say.
Very nice. Yes, we can become so absorbed, and the example was given, it can go down to practically nothing, that those who are free from the bodily concept, their sleeping can go down to 1.5 or 2 hours. Most sleeping is needed for the mind, by the way. Our body only needs 1.5 or 2 hours. The other hours are needed for the mind. So yeah, or they greatly reduce their eating, of course, like Dhruva Maharaj and so forth. As part of our seva, yes. Yes. By the way, please don't do this artificially. You will get sick. Just a little caveat. Fasting on Ekadasi, Janmashtami, yes, very nice. Please do not artificially try to sleep only 3 hours a day and not eat enough food and get sick. Please don't do that. Okay. I have one more question, and I'll put it in the chat, so if any of you don't hear this. Yes, okay, we actually overindulge a lot of so-called necessities. So this is my last question, is in verse 5, the verse itself, which can mean taking shelter of material existence or to take shelter of fear. Krishna uses similar words in the Bhagavad Gita, kam ashrita, to take shelter of lust, and ahankara ashrita, to take shelter of false ego. What does this mean? Material existence is in itself fear of death. Yes, it is, isn't it? Isn't it? Yes. Yes. Is our purpose and happiness source. I like that, Narada Rishi. That it's our shelter means this is our purpose, this is our source of happiness. Excellent, Mahalakshmi. Yes. Yes. Depending on material endeavors without depending on Krishna, thinking I will get what I want through material endeavors. Excellent. Excellent. Oh, yes, yes. Prasant, about talking about people whose security depends on money. Whoa, yes. We cling to fear. We become trapped in a cycle of worry, unable to focus on the goal of life. Excellent. Yes, the material life is always dangerous. But my question was, again, how does it mean that we take shelter of fear? I know it's fearful. Fear shelter is doing anything without considering Krishna, making decisions based on the mind demands. Excellent. Oh, Radhika says, we are doing the same things that brought us back into this scary world. Woohoo! Advaita Krishna Prabhu, yes.
Bhayamashita means the defense principle. We defend ourselves, so we take care of ourselves. So without defending yourself, how are you going to live? You defend against disease, you defend against hunger, you defend. So Bhayamashita, everyone is in Bhayamashita because it's a defense principle. Otherwise, we just collapse.
Could you do all those same things because you love Krishna and you want to take care of your body and your health because you love Krishna, rather than out of fear of death? Could you do the same exact things, but with a different motive, a different shelter?
Yeah, by making it as minimum as possible.
But also having a different driver. Yes, Mahalakshmi, we take shelter of fear, we actually forget Krishna. Yes. Nilamani, fearful of returning to the material world and fearful of not utilizing this for opportunity. Yes, that's how Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is defining Vaidhi Bhakti in this section. That when we take shelter of Krishna out of those fears, that's Vaidhi Bhakti. Okay, we have, and Leela Madhurya, Lalita, you're saying the same thing. Fear of material life helps us to become serious in Krishna consciousness. That is, again, one of the definitions of Vaidhi Bhakti. Okay, we have 3 minutes. If anyone has any general questions on anything or comments that they'd like to bring up before we close. And I can eat my barley soup. Yes, Mahalakshmi. I have to heat it up.
Krishna, this is a question that I've been asked several times and I have answered to my capacity. But
Okay.
at times, mothers of kids ask me, well, tell me that they don't read Krishna book to their children because there is so much violence.
Oh, wow. Yes, we actually had, she's not here anymore, but we used to have someone in this community who was involved with the Gurukula and who was saying, you know, I don't want us telling any of the demon stories to the children, that it will frighten them. So I can give you my answer. Since the beginning of human history, children have been told scary stories.
Yeah.
If we think about like all of the fairy tales that, you know, I heard when I was a kid, like, you know, Hansel and Gretel go in the forest and they're captured by a witch who wants to eat them. Children have been, you know, Little Red Riding Hood who goes to see your grandma and it's actually a wolf. Children have been told scary stories from the beginning of time. Why? The world is a scary place. And children need to have, their children are already feeling that the world is a scary place. And these stories help them, if they're told properly, help teach them how to navigate that fear and how to deal with that fear and how to be safe. Now, when we're telling them stories about Krishna killing the demons, that is transcendent. And there is no difference at all between Krishna's playing games with his friends and dancing with the gopis and killing demons and even creating rivers of blood with parts of animals floating in the rivers of blood. And our children can learn that even though it's a very scary place, this world, that ultimately Krishna's in control and that he's dealing with the demons and that we can depend on Krishna. And even if apparently we're under the grip of some demon, like Prahlad Maharaj, and even if temporarily, apparently, somebody is hurting us, that ultimately we can take shelter of Krishna. Pretending to children that this world is not dangerous and not scary, it doesn't really benefit anybody, but rather giving them the means to navigate that. And by the way, the children already know it's a scary place. They've already fallen and scraped up their elbows and knees. When I was a kid, I had, like always, I had bandages on my elbows and knees. As soon as one would get healed, I'd get a new one. They already know this. They've already fallen from things and they've already gotten sick and they already know this. So we're helping them to actually deal with this, and especially if we're doing this in relationship to Krishna, that's not going to be more scary for them. It's going to be more reassuring. So thank you all for correcting any of my mistakes. Any mistakes I made, please ignore. And anything good here is from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas and from Prahlad Maharaj himself, and certainly not from me. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.